Hello, this is Ben Television News Roundup, a compilation of major stories in the week ending. I'm Tunde Alabi. Thank you for being part of the program and Happy New Year. Prime Minister David Cameron has pledged £2.3 billion as part of capital schemes that will make a difference across the country, including building more flood defences. The Prime Minister stated that his government will continue to reassess government spending on flood defences just as small communities across England have been hit by more floods.
Well, I've come to thank the emergency services who've done an amazing job here in York as elsewhere in the country, but I also wanted to come here and thank a lot of the volunteers who've been filling sandbags. Obviously, we've seen huge levels of rainfall, very high rivers, and that's caused the flooding. So we're still in the emergency phase in some places like in York, but then we'll have to turn our minds to the recovery and how we help people get back in their homes. Well, in York, there are two sets of flood defences. The flood defences on the Ouse, which have worked, and then the flood defences on the Foss, which weren't able to work, and that's why there's been the flooding that there has been. But we spend a lot of money on flood defences. We're going to spend even more in the future, and they have protected many thousands of houses from floods, but they don't always do enough. But obviously after any one of these events, it's right to sit down and look at what you've spent, what you've built, look at what you're planning to spend, look at what you're planning to build, and work out, is it in the right places? Are we doing it in the right way? Do we need to do more? And we'll ask all those questions. We've spent more in the last Parliament than in the previous Parliament, and we're going to spend even more in this Parliament. So it's a rising budget, £2.3 billion on capital schemes that will make a real difference right up and down the country. And as I say, though, let's have a look and see whether more needs to be done and whether the flood defences need to be made even higher than they are already. Should we spend more per head of the population on flood defences in the north than we do in the south? But the key thing is to spend the money where it's needed, and if more money needs to be spent to help with the flood barriers. Here in Yorkshire, for instance, we spent £100 million since I became Prime Minister on flood defences. We plan to spend in this Parliament an extra £280 million, so almost 3 times as much again. But again, let's look at where we're building it, where we're spending it, and see if there's more that can be done.
Meanwhile, Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has been visiting victims of floods in parts of England, talking to families and businesses affected.
How are you doing? How are you? Good to see you. Good to see you. Well done for your work. So what are you doing today?
One is we obviously need better flood defences. They did help. They did reduce the damage, but they didn't stop it altogether. So clearly cuts in flood defence programmes by the government are not helpful. The second one is the wider issues of river management and storms. And when I called Sue on Monday morning, I was in Paris for the climate change conference. So we've got to do something more about reducing the rate of global warming. And clearly there is, to me, a link between this and more unpredictable storms. And for the people of this town, a number of things come through. One is the devastation to their homes that's happened. Unbelievable level of community spirit of people coming together to support each other during a time of terrible difficulty, and fantastic response by the emergency services. All the stuff that firefighters do, and it's not just fire service, it's everything else you do, so you should be recognised for that, both in your responsibility and the funding of it.
Yeah, well,
that's absolutely our policy.
Excellent. Well, it's good to hear that. Good luck getting that through.
Mr. Corbyn also visited firefighters who have been evacuating victims of flood.
I'm here today in the fire station in Carlisle in Cumbria, and we've just come from Cockermouth, which was very seriously flooded last weekend, and Carlisle, which was equally badly flooded. I've been also concerned about the issue of spending on flood defences. The money that was spent some years ago has obviously helped, but if it doesn't deal with the entirety of the problem, as it hasn't on this occasion, then two things need to happen. One is to spend more, but also to look at the question of river systems and river management and water runoff, and that we're going to be doing. Many of the people that I met in Cockermouth and here in Carlisle are not insured. They can't afford the £10,000 a year flood excess, so there has to be an insurance system which covers them and their needs. I've come here to say thank you to the firefighters for the work they've done and to support their claim that the fire service should also include as a statutory obligation dealing with floods and flooding issues, because that in reality is what they do. That would mean they should be properly funded. Closing fire stations, taking appliances out of service, making firefighters redundant is hardly the way to deal with the serious problems of flooding. Last weekend I went to Paris for the Climate Change Conference, and I took part in a lot of debates and a lot of discussion there, and it's a fascinating process. Unless we do something, all of us across the world, about the levels of emissions, the levels of pollution, and the problems of global warming, then there's going to be worse things ahead. There's going to be more floods, there's going to be more desertification, there's going to be more devastation all around the world. We need now to have legally binding climate change targets so that we do stop the world's temperature rising by any more than 2 degrees, maybe less than that. But we've got to move fast on it. There's got to be a legally binding international agreement now at the climate change talks in Paris. At the end of the day, we're one world. At the end of the day, we all rely on each other to look after each other and to survive.
U.S. President Barack Obama has said the U.S. has successfully detected, foiled, and taken out a series of terrorist threats to the United States and its citizens in the last few years. President Obama stated that the government's strategies of going after terrorists anywhere in the world, preventing terrorists from entering the U.S., and stepping up efforts to prevent attacks in the country have proved very effective.
Now, after the terrorist attacks in Paris and San Bernardino, I know that a lot of Americans were anxious, and that's understandable. It's natural. What matters most to all of us are our friends and our families and our communities and their safety. That's true of folks inside of government as well as outside of government. But here's what I want every American to know. Since 9/11, we've taken extraordinary steps to strengthen our homeland security. Our borders, our ports, our airports, our aviation security, including enhanced watch lists and screening. And we've gotten much better, thanks in part to the people in this room, of preventing large, complex attacks like 9/11. Moreover, and I think everybody here will agree, we have the very best intelligence, counterterrorism, homeland security, and law enforcement professionals in the world. Our folks are the best. Across our government, these dedicated professionals, including here at NCTC, are relentless, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. At the Operations Center here, people from across our government work literally shoulder to shoulder, poring over the latest information, analyzing it, integrating it, connecting the dots. They're sharing information, pushing it out across the federal government, and just as importantly to our state and local partners. In other words, what you see here today is one strong, united team. So our professionals have a remarkable record of success. Of course, when terrorists pull off a despicable act like what happened in San Bernardino, it tears at our hearts. But it also stiffens our resolve to learn whatever lessons we can and to make any improvements that are needed. In the meantime, what the world doesn't always see are the successes, those terrorist plots that have been prevented. And that's how it should be. This work oftentimes demands secrecy. But as Americans, we should not forget how good these patriots are. Over the years, they have taken countless terrorists off the battlefield. They have disrupted plots. They've thwarted attacks. They have saved American lives. And so for everybody who is involved in our counterterrorism efforts, I want to say thank you. And the American people, thank you. Now, I want to repeat what my team just told me. At this moment, our intelligence and counterterrorism professionals do not have any specific and credible information about an attack on the homeland. That said, we have to be vigilant. As I indicated in my address to the nation last week, we are in a new phase of terrorism, including lone actors and small groups of terrorists, like those in San Bernardino. Because they are smaller, often self-initiating, self-motivating, they're harder to detect, and that makes it harder to prevent. But just as the threat evolves, so do we. We're constantly adapting, constantly improving, upping our game, getting better. And today the mission to protect our homeland goes on three main fronts. First, we're going after terrorists over there, where they plot and plan and spew their propaganda. As I described at the Pentagon, we're hitting ISIL harder than ever in Syria and Iraq. We are taking out their leaders. Our partners on the ground are fighting to push ISIL back, and ISIL has been losing territory. Our special operations forces are hard at work. We took out the ISIL leader in Libya. We've taken out terrorists in Yemen and Somalia. So we're sending a message. If you target Americans, you will have no safe haven. We will find you, and we will defend our nation. Meanwhile, as always, we're working to protect Americans overseas, including our military bases and service members. And Secretary John Kerry updated us on security at our embassies and our diplomatic posts. Second, we continue to do everything in our power to prevent terrorists from getting into the United States. We're doing more with countries around the world, including our European partners, to prevent the flow of foreign terrorist fighters, both to places like Syria and Iraq and back into our countries. We're implementing additional layers of security for visitors who come here under the visa waiver program, and we're working with Congress to make further improvements. Any refugee coming to the United States, some of them victims of terrorism themselves, will continue to get the most intensive scrutiny of any arrival. They go through up to 2 years of vetting, including biometric screening. And the review that I ordered into the fiancé visa program, under which the female terrorist in San Bernardino came here, is ongoing. Third, we're stepping up our efforts to prevent attacks here at home. As I said, the NCTC is constantly sharing information with our state and local partners. Across the country, more than 100 joint terrorism task forces are the action arm of this fight. Federal, state, and local experts all working together to disrupt threats. At the state level, fusion cells are receiving tips and pushing information out to local law enforcement. And just yesterday, the Department of Homeland Security updated its alert system to make sure Americans are getting the most timely and useful information. And with groups like ISIL trying to radicalize people to violence, especially online, part of our meeting today focused on how we can continue to strengthen our partnership between law enforcement, high-tech leaders, communities, faith leaders, and citizens. So we've got to keep on building up trust and cooperation that helps communities inoculate themselves from the kind of propaganda that ISIL's spewing out, preventing their loved ones, especially young people, from succumbing to terrorist ideologies in the first place. And finally, one of our greatest weapons against terrorism is our own strength and resilience as a people. Now, that means staying vigilant. If you see something suspicious, say something to law enforcement. It also means staying united as one American family, remembering that our greatest allies in this fight are each other, Americans of all faiths and all backgrounds. And when Americans stand together, nothing can beat us. Most of all, we cannot give in to fear or change how we live our lives, because that's what terrorists want. That's the only leverage that they have. They can't defeat us on a battlefield, but they can lead us to change in ways that would undermine what this country is all about. And that's what we have to guard against. We have to remind ourselves that when we stay true to our values, nothing can beat us. So anyone trying to harm Americans need to know, they need to know that we're strong and that we're resilient, that we will not be terrorized. We've prevailed over much greater threats than this. We will prevail again.
And with that story from the United States of America, we conclude the news roundup for this week. Thank you for being part of the program. and do have a good week ahead of you. Bye. As part of our continued efforts to reach the African and other ethnic communities in the United Kingdom with greater impacts and create the platform to hear your silent and unheard views in this hugely growing community in the United Kingdom, our channel, Ben TV, presents to you another live current affairs television program. Our focus on the program is to review and discuss issues around the diaspora community in the UK. The program offers you that unrestricted voice on issues affecting you in the UK. Join us live every Monday at 10 a.m. to 12 noon. Another business segment of Dialogue in Diaspora, 2 to 3 p.m. every Monday. But guess what? You know you can be part of the program. Just send us an email at bentelevisionuk@gmail.com. Dialogue in Diaspora, your voice, your opinion on our TV.